All right. So once again, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Again, my name is Samantha Bowers, consultant for continuing education at the State Library of Iowa. I have one other state library staffer on the call. That is Tom, that I know of. There could be others who are lurking, but Tom Kaiser, my colleague here from our Specialized Library Services Department, is also with us, as well as four wonderful panelists. And I will introduce them as we roll along here. But today's topic is strategic treasure hunting. And so if you joined us last week for Tom's presentation, we heard a little bit from him about how to identify and select materials in your collection, your local history collections for digitization. So we now have four people in the room with us who have done just that to one extent or another, and they all have quite different experiences and lots of interesting things to share. So I'm going to invite everyone except for Chris to turn their cameras off for now. And the way we have this structured is that each member of our panel is going to take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about their project and kind of how they did it and what they did. And then some have some pictures or slides to share. And then after each one wraps up their portion, we have some questions prepared. And of course, we want questions from you, our audience, as well about their projects. So first up is Chris Brown, and Chris is at the Pella Public Library, where he has been hard at work on the Pella Community Memory Database.
That's it, the Pella Community Memory Database.
All right. So
Thank
Chris,
you, Sam. Yeah,
of course. Tell us a little bit about what you've been working on.
Yeah, so the Pella Community Memory Database is the first large-scale attempt in the history of Pella to actually document Pella's history online and actually get some of that material digitized. Of course, like many towns, it's been available in various, piles and filing cabinets and countertops throughout the community. But this was the first attempt to really get it online. And to kind of give you an idea of how this project came about, I've got to walk back a little bit and tell you about Pella. Pella has kind of a unique history. It was founded by Dutch immigrants who came over from the Netherlands to escape religious persecution. Basically, the Netherlands had a state church and they didn't agree with it, so they came over here. They came to Iowa in order to be able to worship as they chose, and they founded this town called Pella. And so ours is the story of Dutch migration, Dutch immigration, and the Dutch history clear up through to the present day. And it has an impact, of course, not only on, when we collect this history, it has an impact not only on, our community, but also the broader community, because it is a story in part of Dutch migration in America. So that's kind of what we were interested in documenting. And I have to roll you back to 2018 to before this project. And at that time, we had a genealogy room at the Pella Public Library, and we had, like a lot of people, we had loose leaf family history, scraps of things that people had donated to us in vertical files, so just files in a cabinet. And our initial goal with this project was just to pull out a few select materials and try to digitize those materials, just get a few things online to just sort of whet people's appetite for this, because prior to this, they weren't well cataloged, they weren't well indexed, it was hard to find them. And so what we did was we actually wrote a grant, and then I got an email in my inbox saying the Institute of Museum and Library Services was starting a new program called Accelerating Promising Practices in Small Libraries. And they were going to give money directly to small libraries in a way that they'd not done before to complete projects in 4 major categories. And one of those categories was community memory. And so I, just on a whim, just to get some experience with federal grant writing, I'd never done anything like this before, I decided to write the grant. I sent it off. I didn't think too much about it. In early 2019, our director announced her retirement. And in July 2019, while I was sitting in the interim director's chair, I got a phone call, and on the other end was a state representative saying, "Congratulations on this federal grant." And I just kind of sat there for a second. I'm like, "I'm sorry, would you say that again?" And they said, "You just got a federal grant for $29,000. And so that was the beginning of our project. And we really hit the ground running. We bought equipment, we hired staff, and we really started to digitize these files in a way that we hadn't done before. We had 300 of these vertical files to digitize. And with the addition of staff, thanks to this grant, we were able to do that. Now, the second half of the grant was regarding community partners, and that we partnered with the Pella Historical Society, which had a lot more of the history laid out in different areas. They had boxes and boxes of photographs of different buildings and different time periods, events that went on in Pella, all sorts of different things. And we found that to be very valuable. And we approached them about that and said, we got this grant, we are wanting to do this, and we would like to digitize your materials. We'd like to position the public library as part of one of the maintainers of history in Pella, Iowa. We'd like to help you come online. And at first, their attitude was actually one a little bit of reluctance, because they were concerned that if they started to digitize their materials, they would have difficulty getting people to actually come and view those materials in person, and it would affect their attendance. I argued against that. I'm happy to say it did not affect their attendance negatively at all. They actually have increased their attendance, and I like to think that's because of the database. I'm not sure it really is, but they've increased their attendance, and we were able to get those materials digitized as well. There's plenty more to talk about later on, but in sum total, when the project was all said and done and the method we used, we were able to digitize over 15,000 pages of information. And we were able to, at the time of this presentation, we were able to have over 100,000 page views to the website. So it really has expanded beyond my wildest dreams. And it's kind of, the grant was over the course of 2 years, so don't think I did this in 6 months, but it really does speak to how, if you have these treasures and you value these treasures, that you want to make sure to go ahead and go for it. Go for that grant, go for that funding opportunity, get out there and give it a try, because it really is important to get this out into the community, and it positions your library as well to be at the center of that community memory and that community history. It's an avenue through which you can access the community.
Chris, you'll have to drop a link for the CMD into the chat so people can take a look at it.
Yes,
we'll talk a little bit about hosting as we go along today, but you built your own website to hold all those materials, or through the grant you had a website, right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Well, good. Thank you, Chris. Exciting times in Pella. And I'm curious, maybe at some point we'll have time to talk about this. I've been to the Pella Public Library. You guys have a whole Dutch language historical collection. Is that right?
Well, we have a Dutch language collection and we have a historical collection, and then there's some crossover between the two. Yes, but we digitized, and we did digitize some materials that we couldn't read.
Right.
Because we know that people from Google Analytics, we know that people from the Netherlands are accessing this.
Cool. They don't teach Dutch in Pella schools anymore?
No, unfortunately not.
My husband grew up there, so I can rag on them a little bit. Well, great. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Next, we're going to go to Dara at the West Point Public Library in West Point. Dara, can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Sure. Thanks, Sam. Yep. My name is Dara Sanders, and I am the director at the West Point Public Library. I've been there for about 6 years now. We are a small library, size B, and have a small staff. I am a full-time, and I have 2 part-time staff. So unlike Chris, we are much smaller, and my project was on a much smaller scale. We are unique in that we are a part library, part museum, and part museum tourist information center. So I was going to share my screen and just show you a few pictures of our library. Do this. Hit the share button. Sorry, I'm new at presenting on this. So that is our library. We have a lot of display cases throughout our library. Go to another one here. go. This is another picture of our library. And then we also have a dedicated genealogy room, which is what I'm sitting in here at the moment presenting. So we have been working on organizing our family histories, but over here on the shelf, that's where our glass plate negatives sit. So I am going to talk about, let me stop sharing. I'm going to talk about our glass plate negative project. It incorporates about 320 portraits from an unknown photographer around early to mid 1930s. And digitizing our local history never crossed my mind until in about June of 2020. I had an email from a gal named Peggy Sanders, and she was with the Fall River County Historical Society in Hot Springs, South Dakota. She said that they had purchased a bunch of glass plate negatives from a local, I think, sale or auction, and assuming that they were of the people from their community. However, after she scanned a couple and started really looking, she realized they weren't from South Dakota, but they were from West Point, Iowa, from around our area. So she contacted us at the library because she didn't know who else might be interested in them. And of course, we were interested. So we actually posted about it on our Facebook page. And just from that alone, we got a couple of people who spontaneously offered to donate to purchase those glass plate negatives. And we also used some memorial funds. Once we purchased them, though, we had to figure out how are we going to get them from South Dakota to Iowa, because you cannot ship them, through the mail. Luckily, this is where we started to form a few partnerships with people in our community. We had a patron who was retired, but he would drive a truck every so often. And he actually was driving a pickup or a semi truck out there for a local company. And he was happy to transport those back and forth for us. So that's how we got him here in about January of 2021. Next, we had to find someone to help us with the scanning of the glass plates, because we are, like I said, are small. We don't have the time, resources, or expertise to do something like this by ourselves. So I needed to find someone with a scanner and that had knowledge about how to safely handle the glass plate negatives, which brings me to Rhonda Freevert. She was the former director at the Burlington Public Library that is close to us. And one of their volunteers did a lot of volunteering for her library and scanning their glass negative projects in. And he was more than happy, because he was between projects, to help us with ours. And it took about a year before he was able to get all the negatives scanned in. He only volunteered on Mondays, but about a year later, we had them all scanned in. So I really do encourage you to reach out to people who have done projects similar to yours. They have a lot of great information, a lot of great resources they're able to share. The only really equipment and materials that we had to have was that special scanner. And since Burlington already had one, we did not have to go ahead and purchase anything like that. The only thing we did have to purchase was the boxes and envelopes to store the glass plates in. We had to order some negative enclosures and a couple of boxes to store them all in. And we ordered them from Hollinger Metal Edge. That's what they recommended for us. And that's they do archival storage products, and they're expensive, but they're really, really nice and a good quality. We didn't discard our old envelopes, however, because they did contain information and were historical themselves. And when I'm all done talking here, I'll share with you a few of the pictures from the project, and actually a few of the glass plates that we have. So we finished scanning them in December of 2021. And then my next question was, now we have these all digitized. Now, how do I share them with the community and other people in a way that are away from our town? So I reached out to Tom, because Rhonda had told me about the Iowa Digital Heritage Site. And so I reached out to Tom, and he helped me figure out got me all set up and how to upload the pictures. It really helped that Fritz had put together, that he was our volunteer, an Excel document that listed all the pertinent information about the negatives. It was helpful because it listed like each negative, and it had who was on, who was in it, what the picture represented, the number. So we used that a lot when we were uploading information. I also made for a binder. It kind of looks like I just made a binder, and inside the binder, I went ahead and put the instructions that Tom had told us. I had written them all out. I can't really see because of the light, but anyway, there are instructions on that. So we could work on uploading the pictures whenever we had free time, since we did not have a volunteer helping us with that. Usually a lot of the information that we needed to upload for each of our pictures to the site was copy and paste. So we would have the document up here and we would copy and paste that information into the site. After the initial setup, it went pretty smoothly. The uploads don't go live until Tom works his magic and makes them go live. I just usually email him when we have a bunch done. We have 90 that have been uploaded. We've done more since then. I just haven't had Tom upload them yet. Summer hit, of course, and we got busy with our summer reading program. So we are back at it now. I guess we're going to, as far as our library and where we are with the project, we are going to continue to upload pictures. And when we're finished, I was going to roll it out to the community. We're going to have an open house so we can display what glass plates look like, because I had never seen them myself personally. Also have a few laptops and an iPad set up so that they can get to the website and see how that works. And of course, we'll also put a link to the website on our link to that state website on our local website. And also we have a genealogy computer here in our genealogy room, and we'll go ahead and put that information on there as well. So I'm just going to share with you just a little bit of so here's these envelopes that they had us purchase to preserve the actual glass negatives, and they're four panels. And then here is like a glass negative, and maybe you're all familiar with that already. I just never had seen one in person. And we have them all stored in these nice boxes, which we also got from the Holland Metal Edge. So they sit on our shelf like that. Right now we have sticky notes on the edge, but I will probably put some labels on those so we know what letters of the alphabet are on those. And I wanted just to share my screen real quick and show you just a couple of the website where we have them. And then I'm finished. Share. Okay. No, not that. Not that. Okay, so here's the actual negatives that we have, the actual pictures that were digitized. And I wanted to show you, if you flip through these are just some of the ones that we got, and they were a lot of portraits from people in our area. And it was interesting, even back then, let me find her. You can see that this side, she has a lot of wrinkles, and this side she does not. So they even back then in the 1930s touched up their photos, kind of like what we do with our modern day filters on Snapchat and Instagram. From what the photographer said, he thinks they used a pencil on the actual glass plate to go over those wrinkles. So I thought that was interesting. And our website actually is, if I can get here, right there. So that's what we have up on the state website, the Iowa Heritage Digital Collection. We have the West Point Public Library glass plate collection, and these are the 90 that we have up there so far, but we will eventually, hopefully within this year, get all 320. So it was about, I would say from start to finish.
Dara, hit refresh on that. Tom said he might have, if I'm understanding Tom's message right, he might have pushed those live.
Oh,
even now.
Okay. Well, let me try again. Now it's telling me.
Lost the internet. Well, I'm sorry. Can we do that? Let's try.
Let me go back, and I can go through it this way. Let me go to that link again.
Could be
I don't know.
Change in the URL, it seems. But we can also go to Iowa Heritage and search for West Point and pull them up. Is that right?
Oh, you want me to do that?
I mean, and I would invite Tom to jump in here too and help me out.
I don't know why all of a sudden it was there and now it's, oh, here it is.
Okay.
Oh, we have 93. So maybe 93? If we had 3
all
more.
Right.
Thanks, Tom. So anyway, from start to finish, it was about $1,000, I would say, for our project. So it was small. It did take a couple of years, and we're still working on it because, like I said, it's small. Maybe in an ideal, maybe we should have hopefully gotten a volunteer. Maybe that would have helped us finish it a little sooner. But it definitely opened my eyes to digitizing collections. And like we have all these binders, I would love to do something like that with digitizing those, so that way a lot of people can access those that aren't in our community currently.
I feel like the photos are such a quick win, right? They're engaging, and that baby was the cutest baby I've ever seen besides mine. And and the story about the wrinkles is so fun. And from there you have a little bit of community buy-in maybe to do some of the more boring pieces of paper or what have you. But and thanks for sharing the glass plate negative. I was gonna ask how like if you drop it on a table, it breaks.
I get, yeah, they're pretty fragile. Yeah. Yes. From what I understood. And even when you scan them, you have to be careful when you scan them that you don't do it wrong. So we were very happy that Fritz volunteered to take our project on.
Well, that's very nice. Well, thank you, Dara. Okay, next up we have Mara in State Center, and it is the public library in State Center. And Mara, help me out with how it's pronounced.
The Gutekunst Public Library.
Gutekunst Public Library. I'm not German enough to get it right the first time, but tell us a little bit about your project.
Well, so ours started, I think ours might be, of everything that we've heard, is the smallest project yet. But I was inspired. During COVID, I zoomed in on the Association of Rural and Small Libraries conference, and I didn't know anything about digitizing. It wasn't on my radar at all. And I just happened to sit in on a webinar from this small library in Colorado that was doing a project like that. And I thought it was interesting, and our doors were still closed at that time. So we had some time for staff to work on projects. And so we decided, let's just jump in, let's just try digitizing one of our genealogies. And so, just as let's test the waters. And so we did that. We selected one that simply we chose it because the woman who had prepared the genealogy was still alive, was in the community. So I reached out to her and I asked her if that was okay if we did it, and she was all over that. So we did. I didn't know anything about the heritage. I didn't know anything about scanning. I didn't know anything about the Iowa Heritage Digital Collection. I didn't know who Tom Kaiser was. I didn't know any of it. I just thought, we're just going to scan this. And then I thought, we're just going to put it on the website. And I'm going to call and ask Dory Bowles how to do that. So we scanned it on just a normal, we didn't have a flatbed. We just had like our normal office scanner copier thing. And so we did that. And then I contacted Dory because I was just trying to play around on my little website and figure out how to attach this. What seems to be too big. I'm running into issues. So I called Dory, and Dory's like, hey, do you know this guy named Tom Kaiser? And so she introduced me to Tom and the IHDC. So, because if any of you were thinking you can just put this on your little library website, it's not set up to hold this volume of stuff. So Tom then helped me to set up our page on the IHDC and helped me with all of that process and got us in place. And then we uploaded that that first genealogy. And the first one was, right here. This was the first one, okay, like everybody has. So this was our very first project. And we just scanned it and played around with it and put it on there. And then from there, we just started adding, mostly we went through people that were here, and we could ask for permission to upload their genealogy. So we started with that one. It took us a long time, maybe at least a month, to get that all scanned. And then we started working on other ones as there were people who had prepared them and had donated them. We just reached out and asked for permission and continued working through them. We are a small staff, we're a size C, but we're all part-time. We have one staff member in particular that does the lion's share of the scanning, and then I do all of the uploading to the IHDC. We also have a glass plate negative story. I didn't know anything about those. I had never seen them. I would love to say that ours are all in great little envelopes, like Dara's are. We had boxes of like wooden crates of maybe 400 or 500 of them that were actually from the Sparks Photography Studio, which was here in State Center back around the turn of the century. They had been in a shed stored just in these crates. They've been rained on. They sat there for over 100 years before they were moved from the corner of that shed. I don't know how it all happened, but they went on a little journey where they ended up at the Iowa DOT library. I think it had something to do with us being on the Lincoln Highway. So as part of their history, they were housed there for a while. They didn't want them. They moved them to Parks Library at Iowa State. They didn't want them. And then about 2 years ago, then they came back. Parks reached out to the State Center Historical Society, and they came back to State Center. Unfortunately, they're still in boxes, but at least they're in a dry corner of the library. So we still have a lot of work to do. We actually cooperated with, we contacted, again, like our whole investment in this project has been like $100 if you don't count staff time, which who counts staff time? So we tried to like rinky dink how to scan. So like we had like black paper and cereal boxes, and we were trying to do this on our little scanner thing, you know, and we were failing. And so I thought these were really rare and nobody knew anything about them. Anyway, I finally reached out in desperation to Photosynthesis, a shop in Ames, and they scanned us and they're like, oh yeah, we'll do that for like $0.10 a piece. So we packed up some of them, a chunk of them, and took them over just to try it. They scanned it, they digitized them, and then we uploaded those. So I'm going to try and share my screen so that you can see. I'm not very good at this. I'm going to apologize right now. I'm not really any better at this than I am at storing glass plate negatives. Okay, so this is our website. And then down here is where then you can go into our local genealogy section. And here's a little picture of our little heritage collection and what we're working on. And then these now are the different genealogies that we have uploaded and are stored on IHDC, including the Sparks Photo Gallery collection. And again, we've done about a quarter of what we have. A big part of it has to do with sorting through, because they've been stored so improperly for so very long. A lot of them are not any good. So we've had staff that have worked through, and we also don't have the spreadsheet with all of the identifying information. We have boy in short pants and boy in suit, and there's boy smiling in winter coat, who interestingly enough looks shockingly like one of our little patrons. So it is kind of fun. We don't know who these are. There were no identifying factors. So we've kind of had to create that data. But there were a few interiors. Everybody was hoping for lots of building interiors from our Main Street businesses, and there were not. They were mostly portraits. But that has been a really fun thing to do. And then if we go back, then the genealogies are simply a matter of, this was the first one, the Fricke family. And so then each page has been scanned in here. So one of the things that our board had first expressed concern about was exactly what Chris had talked about, was concern about, if we put this all online, will people still come into the library? And I think absolutely yes. In fact, I think what it's done is heightened interest in it. And it also makes it available for people who, you know, we all have genealogists who go to the towns. This makes it more accessible for people who aren't able to travel. So we've got a lot to do. We still have a lot of glass plate negatives. We still have a lot of genealogies to go through, a lot of materials. When Tom contacted us, here was the game changer. When Tom contacted us about being a pilot library for one of the flatbed scanners, that changed everything and made the process a lot simpler. So thank you, Tom. Our staff member is hoping that it never goes away, but we also understand that other people may want to take advantage of it. So it has been a huge, huge piece of the pie in making this project more manageable. So we're going to just keep plugging away forever on this. So that's kind of our story.
Very fun. I love to hear it. And our last panelist today is Jeanne, and Jeanne is calling in from the Clinton Public Library. Jeanne, are you able to hop on here?
Hi, my name is Jeanne, and I'm the Special Collection Associate for the Clinton Public Library. Although we have many collections that we could have put on the Iowa Heritage website, such as plates, yearbooks, family history books, the largest collection that we have is the Johnson Lieferman photo collection. A little bit about the photo collection. Johnson Photo was in business from around 1940 to the mid-1980s. And Lieferman Photography was in business from about 1985 to 2011. Lieferman Photography had purchased the Johnson collection when they closed in the mid-80s. And then when Lieferman retired in 2011, they were unable to sell this collection. And so they decided to offer it and relinquish all rights to the Clinton Public Library. Most of this collection is negatives, but there are photographs, sales cards, many boxes of sales cards, and then from 2005 to 2012 is digital. Unfortunately, we kind of went through this period where we had a lot of different directors, so this was started and then stopped and started and stopped because of that. And anyway, when Susan became our director in 2019, I approached her and our library board about this collection and what we could do with it. She had sent me an email about Iowa Heritage, and I'd also received one from another director, Holly, years ago. And so that's when we decided to go forth. There's a lot of photos in this collection. Stuart and I are trying to do as many as we can. It's just a project on the side when we have time. We've organized the boxes from 1969 to 2006 by invoice number, and then the rest of them are either by weddings because they were previously marked that, or by years, or by even church names. And then we've gone through each box to check the state of them. One box we did have to throw away because they were moldy. We haven't gone through every single envelope in each box because there's, over 200 boxes, but we've, at least scanned each box to get an impression of what the state was. And then we had to learn how to use the scanners. We had an HP ScanJet 4850 and an Epson Perfection V700 here with no instructions. So I downloaded that off the internet, and then Stuart and I started practicing. And then thanks to Tom Kaiser, we went live April 7th of 2021. Each of these boxes contain family photos, school, marriage, engagements, businesses, aerials, and that list goes on. So on the Iowa Heritage website, that's how we've set up our collections, just to make it easier if somebody only wants to look at weddings instead of having to just sort through all of the photos. Tom has been very helpful. We have come across things like locks of hair with photos. I had no idea why there would be locks of hair with a little ribbon. And I contacted him, hey, do you know anything about this? And Tom has emailed other people and helped us find out some answers about that. We did have a volunteer for a short period of time that helped us go through some of these boxes and pulled empty packages or anything damaged or something that she felt was unique. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us because she graduated from college and she needed to find a full-time job, but we really appreciate all the time that she spent with us. We've had a lot of people across the United States contact us about this collection, people who've had fires and lost all of their photos, and their family members, you know, or themselves had photos taken by Johnson or Lieferman Photography. So that has been really nice to be able to help these people get copies of those photos. I'm just really happy that we've been able to share this collection at Iowa Heritage. And, you know, it just peace of mind knowing that if we had a fire or a natural disaster happen at this library branch, that at least we have them, you know, at least one photo from each package that we've been able to digitize on that website. It just gives us some peace of mind and that they're out there and people can enjoy them.
That's great. Tom did a quick look in Iowa Heritage and he said 1,573 images. So that's a lot of good work.
A couple that are really interesting is the letter P as in Paul 4579. That's one of them with a hair snippet.
Very interesting. Maybe
and you'll see a picture of a little girl. Yeah.
All right. I'll invite all our panelists to come back online here as we work through a few questions. And Jeannie, I'll invite you to start this. I think you kind of kicked us off a little bit, but how you identified what collection you were going to start with.
We jumped. Really, we jumped because in each of these boxes, we don't know what's in them. They're not just, you know, high school photos. There's a mix of everything in all of these boxes. Now, there are some that were marked with W's that are supposedly just weddings, but my coworker and I have found that other boxes are just a mishmash of many different things. There could be aerials mixed in with commercial and other commercial photos, high school photos, baby photos, marriages. We've even found funerals. So we are just choosing a box and going from there. We have an Excel spreadsheet that we document what we've scanned and what we are putting on the website so that we can keep track. And right now we're trying to do like the 40s and the 50s. Mm-hmm. But when we set up the collections, that's, you know, we wanted to what we were finding in each of these boxes. So it's not just graduation photos.
Dara, do you want to talk a little bit about your selection process?
Yeah, so we got boxes there. Originally, they were just boxes of these glass plate negatives as well. And so they were numbered though, like in order. So that's how we just started. They're all in the same time period. They were all taken by a photographer who we tried to figure out who it was. There's nothing to indicate who the photographer was. And we're still going to try to research that a little bit more, but we cannot find anybody that had a local name. But we just started with the very first box, and it went numerically in order. So that's what we did. We just went with how they were invoiced or cataloged that way.
Mm-hmm. You also kind of had that defined, like this is everything that you picked up from that library out west. And
yes, and see, on ours had, unlike Jeannie's, I think, or no, maybe Mara's, they had, there's their names on the old envelopes, and either that was the person that paid for those pictures or picked them up, or maybe the father if it was a group photo, or husband. But it seemed like, I mean, there's some tie to that name to the picture. It probably isn't necessarily the person in the picture, but it's a relative of.
That's nice. And Mara, I think you had mentioned you wanted to chime in on this identification question as well.
Yeah, so we, in terms of the genealogies, the glass plate negatives were different. Those, we simply selected those that were still salvageable and had images that we could identify. But for the genealogies, we just started with the low-hanging fruit. We started with people that were still alive that we knew we could get permission, because I think the hardest part for us has been identifying, we have so many genealogies because we've been collecting them for so long, that a lot of the people who created the materials are gone. And figuring out if they have any relatives that are left, figuring out who can release permission has been the biggest challenge for us. So right now we are simply working through the families that are still here, that have representatives from the family that can release permission to do it. So that's kind of ours. We're starting with the biggest families in the area, those that are still around, and then reaching out, as we get through those, trying to catch older people before they're gone. So trying to figure out when I can call this gentleman in Hawaii who doesn't know who I am, but gave us something in the 80s, and trying to get that permission before they're not around, or we don't know who to ask at that point.
Well, and that's pretty amazing. Some of these older collections that you have a record of who was responsible.
Yeah, so that's how we've decided.
Chris, I want to start our next question with you, which is about partnerships. So you talked briefly about some community partners. Is there more you want to say about who you partnered with to make your project happen?
Yeah, so we partnered with the Pella Historical Society and Museums, and we're very lucky because we're a bit of a tourist town, and so we've got they have plenty of volunteers, and they've got their own organization going on, and there was a volunteer archivist there that I was able to work with. But there was some work we needed to do. Not everything that she provided to us to scan in the second half of this project was had a serial number or some way of identifying what it was. She just said, well, they're in a certain order in the box, don't get them out of that order. And easier said than done. If you've done a project like this, it's easier said than done not to get stuff out of order. So basically, but our community partner with the Pella Historical Society, they were excellent. And once we explained to them what we were doing and why, and got them over that hump of being concerned about potentially losing visitors, they were very much on board with the whole thing. So yeah, I encourage you to go out and find those community partners, because this, a project like this, arguing that has a lot of what you call resale value. Don't underestimate the saleability of this project. People really are interested in this sort of thing.
Yeah, and that leads to kind of the next question I want to ask. And so I'll just keep it with you, Chris, for now. But then I know others want to chime in on this too. So what has the community response been? You said the Historical Society has not seen a drop in visits, which is good. But what other kind of response have you seen?
So the community response has been really positive. And one thing I would encourage people to do is kind of keep an informal journal of some of the comments that you receive, because that's helpful if you write additional grants. And one comment in my mind, and I can't tell you the name of the person, but the comment sticks in my head that she came up to I had given her a brochure on this database, and she'd gone home, and it had been a few days, and she came back up to the desk and she said to me, I've never seen my great-grandmother. I'd never seen my great-grandmother, and you have a picture of her. And I had to call somebody else in my family and verify that. And they're like, yeah, that's her. And I'd never seen that picture before. So the stuff is out there. It's just a matter of discovering it and making it available. That's what I'm trying to get at.
That's amazing. Jeanne, I also see that you had something to chime in on community reception. You kind of shared that one story of people calling in from, around the country to find pictures of their family from this professional collection that you've digitized. But what else have you seen from your community on this front?
We have had one negative response, and I let it go in one ear and go out the other because, most of the photos that we are scanning they're over 50 years old. And I did have a patron say, oh, see these pictures you have on that website, they're okay, nothing much. And at that moment, I was a little disappointed, but then I thought about it, and it's like, the state of the photos and the negatives in this collection, some of them aren't the best, and, we're just doing what we can do. And, like Chris just said, he was able to help someone, find a photo of a grandparent that they'd never even seen. Well, I have a really heartwarming story, but we had a man come in before the pandemic, and he wanted us to help him find anything that we could about his son. When his son was in high school, when his son had gotten married, whatever. His son had passed away, and he was very distraught, and he just wanted some help to find different articles in the Clinton Herald and whatever. And we have this photo collection here, but at the time, like I said, we had this standstill. And I wrote his name down and I said, we have this collection. If anything ever happens and I'm allowed, I will contact you. And Stuart and I looked for these photos and looked for them, couldn't find them. And one day I was going through a sales card box and I saw this young man's name. And here we have them digital, and they're every single proof that was taken of this young man for his senior photos. I can't even tell you how many emails they sent to that man. And he was so happy about this. And I was surprised I reached him because half of the year this man is in Europe. So it's things like that that has really made this project worthwhile, because it made that man feel so much better to have every single proof of his child.
Yeah.
And most people don't buy every single proof when they're purchasing, their wedding packages or their senior pictures or whatever. They only pick a few, for senior pictures especially. So it really made him feel great. And so I think about that whenever I get a little, oh my God, we're never going to get through this collection. It's just so many boxes. I think of things like that, the good stories.
That is a great story. Mara, I will invite you to chime in on that community reception. And then I don't know if you can see the question in chat. That might be one for you too. Unidentified plates. What do you do? But start with what the community reception to your project has been.
Well, it's been really good. We were able to tie in with the local historical society to really kind of plug it after they found after the Sparks photo gallery pictures came back. That we did a whole display during it's in April. It's like National Historic Preservation Week or something like that. A display of the actual glass plate negatives, which are really beautiful in their own, right. And so that brought in a lot and heightened a lot of interest. I can't see the question in the chat though. What is
the question in the chat says, what do you do with unidentified plates or unidentified photographs?
We make up little things that try to identify just so that you can distinguish one from another, like child in hat with bear. We have a whole lot of women wearing hats and men in long coats, but we just put them in with the data that we have, because initially we had hoped that they were going to be photos of all local people, but because State Center is a railroad town, they think that this was a portrait studio for people who came through on the train, had their pictures taken, and then moved on. So we don't know, okay, except for the one that I showed you, that there is a very strong, we have some that you can tell, oh, this is clearly a relative of that, we have a lot of the same genetic traits or what they look very similar to people that are still here. But the vast majority of them are people that are not from here. So we just try to, we had nothing. We didn't have numbers. There was no record of who anybody is. So we're just winging it and hoping that it will somehow be helpful. And at some point, maybe we'll learn more and be able to do further identification.
Any other panelists want to chime in on that question? Unidentified materials?
If I can, I just encourage people not to necessarily not upload unidentified materials. Don't necessarily overlook that just because you can't identify it, because there's somebody out there who might be able to.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what Mara said is just the perfect thing to do is you put in whatever many descriptors that you can. If you put in a descriptor that has anything unique to it, then that's going to be some way for someone to find it and identify it. Unfortunately, nobody's holding a local newspaper or nobody's holding a local advertisement, but anything like that is always helpful.
Mm-hmm. The next question is interesting, and several of you did talk about using volunteers. But does anyone have experience using social tagging or allowing patrons to comment on these items? So how much have you thrown unidentified stuff out to the community at large and said, who are these people? What is this place? I'm seeing a bunch of head shakes.
I can take that again for a second. So we actually, and we cheated Dublin Core a little bit, but we actually set up a field for metadata that was control vocabulary, and basically it had two options in control vocabulary: identified and unidentified. And in that way, when somebody, you could create a URL and people could just view photographs that were unidentified. So if somebody was sitting at home and they wanted, that was their hobby or whatever, was to try to look through these photos and identify them, that's a quick way that they could do that, because they had a URL immediately to all the photos that weren't identified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and using a standardized field like that is a really good idea. Someone comments in the chat, we have pictures on IHDC, and when people find something to add to the picture, they contact us at the library. So you could always put a link to your library's collections out there and ask for help. And I imagine when you're dealing with, Chris, potentially something in Dutch, or even some of the genealogies you've done, Mara, you are also looking for help with transcription or maybe deciphering names or handwriting from time to time. This is another great thing for a volunteer to potentially do. There's a question again for Chris. How did you build your excellent website? That might be one if you've got like the 1-minute version, and then you might have to connect offline with this questioner. But
yes, so the 1-minute version is we had some help. That is actually a content DM backend, which is a product of OCLC, and basically much like the Iowa Digital Collection, you can upload things into it, and you have your own base that you can manage. You can manage your collections, things like that. But a lot of it is done on the back end by OCLC. It's not, I didn't do all the formatting and things like that. I just uploaded and added the metadata.
Yeah. And of course, if you are interested, you can work with the Iowa Heritage Digital Collection. It's the same kind of metadata type backend, and Tom will talk your ear off about that one. I know he will. But in our last couple of minutes, I want to spend just some time talking about maybe the kind of why and future accessibility preservation kinds of question. So, Dara, I know you showed us your envelopes and your boxes, and how considerations for storage and preservation were part of your project going forward.
Sure. Yeah. When we got them, here, I'll grab this real fast. I'll just stick it back on the shelf. They were in like brown, just regular brown boxes, storage boxes. And then each of them were in these little envelopes, and so nicely had the names, the number, the name, remarks. They even had like one 8x10, one 3x5. I mean, they had a lot of information for each of them. And like I said, I was unfamiliar with any digitizing of anything in glass plates in general. So when the volunteer from Burlington talked to us, he very strongly suggested that in order to preserve those glass plate negatives, we needed to purchase something other than these to store them in, because even pulling them in and out of these can damage the plate. So anyway, so he was the one who put us in touch, or gave me some options based on what they had purchased in the past for their library. So that's what I followed, that Hollinger metal edge, and we just purchased those materials. So that way, yeah, so we can keep them in good condition for the future. So that's kind of.
And, you know, obviously not every collection can do that, but whenever you can have multiple copies of something. So now you have a digital copy and you have your print ones. If goodness forbid anything should happen to your library, you know, those are more secure. Tom, did you want to chime in on the storage and preservation side of things?
Well, sure. With the actual physical item, always keep an eye out with the State Historical Society, the grants that they offer for preservation of materials. The same thing with things like the NEH and IMLS will all have grants that cycle through. They may not have a grant every grant cycle, but it pops up time and time again for grants to help meet preservation needs of items, whether it's special collections like glass plate negatives, or even with your regular special collections bound items. There's always grants that cycle through.
For our last couple minutes together, we'll just do a quick round robin. Jeannie, we'll go to you on the phone first. What do you say if someone's considering starting a project like this? How would you encourage them to get started?
Honestly, I'm just going to say jump, just like we did. Just go for it. Ask a lot of questions. Tom has been a great help whenever I've had a question, and, you know, look for things on the internet like we had to, you know, just to use the scanner. Stuart and I didn't even know how to make a negative into an actual photo. Just go for it.
Mara, anything you'd add to that? Just go for it. I kind of think that might about sum it up, huh?
Yeah, just jump in. I had no background. I still don't. I didn't have any background. I didn't know how to do any of this. Tom is a huge asset, so just email him.
Now, Dara, your project kind of just fell into your lap, right? When you got this call out of the blue from South Dakota. Yeah. So you didn't start the year planning to digitize a bunch of stuff, but you did it. So what advice do you have to someone getting going?
We did it. Yeah. And again, second, third, Tom was wonderful. He's been great about helping me figure out how to upload that and get it on the site. And I would suggest too, talking to other librarians or libraries that have done some projects, because they're a good resource and can help as well. I do hope though, now when we finally get this done, because we're close to getting, we just got to finish uploading the pictures. We have all these, I'm staring at them, binders full of family histories like that you were talking about. So I could see us now that I've got my feet wet, we can maybe go on and do something else.
Yeah, you've got the next collection waiting. And Chris, your project was kind of the biggest one of all. So maybe no one's quite headed that far that fast, but
well, I got very lucky because, like I said, I was able to get the federal grant, which I didn't expect to get, and that allowed me, it's easy to brag, but when you've got somebody working 20 hours a week digitizing this stuff, yeah, you can get a lot of stuff done. But again, that was because of that federal grant. We didn't have the money to do that without. So I would say, don't be, and I didn't know anything about this prior to starting either. So I would say, don't be intimidated, jump right in, use your resources. And I'm sure any of the panelists would be happy to talk to you about anything you might have questions about. And yeah, just go for it. Go for it.
I like that. And I think another thing to point out, some consistencies from everyone's story, is that no one did it overnight, right? It's going to take some time, and there's a time commitment there, but figure out what you have, figure out what makes sense. And then I also love closing the loop on really promoting it to your community, either in ways like crowdsourcing, like Chris was talking about, Mara's example of, you know, the little display. And I know, Dara, you said you were planning something similar when you get yours all done, and in Clinton as well, just really getting it out to the community. That's really gonna help you feel good about the time you put into this project, because it is going to be a lot of time, but it can be so worth it in a variety of ways for your community as well. So Tom, anything to add in closing?
Well, I'll just reiterate, like before, you know, the silly joke is, you know, how do you eat an elephant? You know, one bite at a time. You just start and go. Your communities will be thrilled no matter what you put out there. If you put out 10 items, they're going to love it. And so you just keep adding to it and they're going to love it more. As Mara mentioned, I do have a digital package that we loan out now. We do have 6 scanners and laptops that we can loan out to libraries so they can do it, since they don't have necessarily the equipment on hand. It's essentially a baby version of what Chris referred to, what they were using. It's an Epson, I think it's a DS5000, big fat flatbed scanner. It can handle up to 17 by 22, so you can get most of all your flat materials done. And then on the other side, here at the State Library, we do have specialized equipment. If you need to do that special thing, we have an overhead scanner that can handle up to newspaper size. We do have a scanner capable of doing slides and negatives here. The things we have just one of like that we don't loan out, but you're welcome to spend some time with us and get it done down here.
Yeah,
we also have an overhead camera capabilities of doing full-size posters and maps. So other than that, I'm free anytime you need me to give you a hand.
Well, there we go. Again, my thanks to Chris, Dara, Mara, and Jeanne for taking the time to be with us today. My thanks to Tom for loaning us his expertise for the hour. And of course, to all of you for joining us. So thanks for watching, and best of luck with your projects. Use these panelists and any other folks in Iowa libraries as your resource. So you never know where you're going to find some help. But thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.